notes about the first webinar. We had the first webinar back in July. We record the webinars and make them available. We had a slight technical glitch with the first webinar. We did record it, but the format that we recorded it in is not viewable on a Mac. It is viewable on a PC. We're working to get that translated so it can be viewed on a Mac, and then we'll send out a link with that information. With this webinar and the webinars in the future, we'll make sure to record them in a format that can be viewed both on a PC and a Mac. And we will be posting the webinars on the Ocean Data Partnership website, which at this point is still in development, so we don't have that ready yet, but we'll send out links with the webinars and then start posting them on the website. And we'll probably also create a YouTube channel so that folks can access the webinars that way. Let's see. A couple other notes, just a recommendation if you didn't see it in the webinar information, that we recommend that people use their phone for audio. I think we had some issues with the audio going through people's computers last time, so we recommend doing that. What we'll do is we'll have the webinar, and then we will have questions and answers after the webinar. We have everybody muted right now just to eliminate background noise. So if there's something that you need, please use the chat function on the GoToMeeting. If you're having an issue or something, and Jackie will try to resolve it with you. And then also wanted to mention, okay, at the end of the webinar, what we'll do is take folks off mute. We've got quite a few people on the phone, so what I'd ask people to do, if you have a question, maybe let us know through the chat function, and then we'll call people out, ask people to ask their questions, so we don't have a lot of people trying to talk over each other and trying to get a question in. So we'll do that at the end. Also wanted to mention that we do have the next webinar scheduled. We'll be sending out information about that, but just so you could jot it down now, it's going to be October 23rd at 10 a.m. and we'll be having a presentation on the Ocean Tracking Network and some of their data management practices. Okay, so for today's webinar, we have Andy Sherin, who's the Director of the Atlantic Zone Coastal Information Steering Committee. And Andy's going to be giving us a presentation on a self-assessment tool for organizations that provide data to see how well you're doing at that. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Andy, and then I'll come back to moderate the questions at the end. Thanks, everybody.
Hi, Andy. This is Jackie with NARCOOS. It says that you're muted on your end, so please unmute yourself.
See. Hey, I'm unmuted now. Okay.
You're all set.
All set. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Just learning with this technology. I want to thank Tom and Jackie and the partnership for inviting us to deliver this webinar on our work on a self-assessment tool for data providing organizations. My colleague Alexi Bakardax-Westcott, who's with the Secretariat here in Halifax, is with me as well. Oops. There we go. Okay. So in the fall of 2010, the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development in the Auditor General's Office in Canada stated the quotation that's on your screen in front of you here. His report was directed at oil spills from ships and monitoring water resources and adapting to climate impacts. But it's uplifting to see this kind of statement from such a senior person in the public service, and we use this quote a lot in our in any of our presentations. So just a couple of words about the Atlantic Coastal Zone Information Steering Committee. Many of you may already be familiar with us. It was established in 1992 by the Council of Maritime Premiers, and you can see the mission there to promote and facilitate and influence information management policies and programs that enhance integrated coastal and ocean management in Atlantic Canada. Alexi and I are two of the three members of the Secretariat. Many of you may also receive our monthly Coastal Update newsletter. So if you're not on our if you don't, then our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, and please send us an email so you can add us to the email list. The September newsletter just went out yesterday. And the work that we're describing today flows out of our strategic plan, of which parts of it are shown on the slide, with the priority being a collaborative sharing of data and information, and with the strategy of facilitating the commitment and investment of data providers to interorganizational and public access to data and information. So this tool was developed principally to advance that particular strategy. So a little bit more information on the tool. It's a self-assessment tool, sort of an internal report card of sorts. It's targeted at data providing organizations, and it's based upon 11 principles, and there's one or more what I like to call evaluation ladders for each principle, and questions that assist the user in positioning their organization's policies and procedures on the ladder. Leading up to the development of the tool, we collected over 300 documents on accessibility policies from countries, provinces, and municipalities. These are all stored in a Zotero database, and we're struggling with how we could pull it all together in a practical fashion. So this idea of a self-assessment tool came up, and we worked with Dr. Bertram McDonald in the School of Information Management here at Dalhousie University to come up with this tool. That is, the process is that we took the Government of Canada's operating principles for the open government site, and we compared them to three other documents which are also on this on the screen now. The one from the OECD on principles and guidelines for accessing research data from public funding, the American United States Memorandum of Open Data Policy, and the G8 Charter for Open Data, and we narrowed it down to 11 principles. I believe the OECD one has something like 20 or more different principles. So these are the 11 principles that we came up with. Some principles are only from one document, like the primacy principle is only mentioned in the Canadian document. Others are aggregations from other documents. So here's just a quick schematic of what a ladder looks like for one of the principles. This is the principle evaluation. The principle is that there's periodic evaluation by user groups, and you can see the way the ladder is characterized there, with no evaluation earning you a score of 0, and a regular program evaluation is in place earning a score of 5, with other language in between. So how do we envisage the tool being used? So we envision it being used repetitively to mark progress, and so that organizations can see whether they're progressing up the ladders or not. And the individual scores for each ladder are probably more important than the aggregate score because you can use it to target areas to improve upon. It can be used to separately score multiple units within one organization if there's more than one center of responsibility for data dissemination. It can be, as we'll see later in a slide down the road, it can be scored by multiple persons within with different perspectives within the organization to look at how it differs in terms of perspective from different parts of the organization. Organizations could weight scores based upon internal priorities, for instance. And some respondents may choose not to score some ladders because they don't see that it's relevant to their organization. We're very interested in learning from the experience of organizations using the tool. Other people may have a different sort of ideas about how this might be useful to them. And of course, we're interested in knowing how the tool was useful being used in this particular fashion. So now I'm going to just walk through the principles one by one. The first principle is open data by default. There's actually 3 different evaluation ladders for this particular principle. 2 under formal policies and limitations. I'm not going to read these all off for you, but basically we're looking at organizations presuming open data. But we recognize that limitations are necessary, but one ladder looks at the limitations that need to be clear and transparently described and be based upon legislation and policy. Also, we found when we were doing our research on this, that often the actual policies and procedures related to data accessibility are not often easily found within organizations' websites. And this is another measure that we're using under the open data by default principle. Here's an example of the paper form of a ladder for open data by default, showing 2 of the ladders. The first one being related to formal policies, and the second ladder being related to limitations. So you can see scoring 5. There's formal approved policies with presumption that data is open. An example of this was presented to us at a workshop we held last January, where the Halifax Regional Municipality was undergoing an open data pilot, and it was documented that Council had approved this. They have subsequently approved a formal long-term open data policy for the municipality, but it was important for us that we saw that the policy had been approved at a high level. And then the limitations are also an important aspect. We recognize that limitations are necessary for a number of different reasons: privacy, conservation practice, locations of critical infrastructure or species at risk is not necessarily something that you want to be publicly circulated. You'll also notice on the ladder that there is evaluation language for only score 5, 3, 1, and 0. Basically, it's a challenge to come up with language for every level. I think what we are expecting here is if an organization doesn't reach as high up the ladder as 5, but is doing better than 3, that they would give themselves a score of 4. Completeness. You notice here that completeness includes metadata. A data set is not complete without good metadata. My experience is that the partnership, within the partnership, we take metadata very seriously, and all of the members of the partnership are to be commended for taking that perspective. you'll notice that it talks about an acceptable standard for metadata. We could have said, well, it's ISO standard and there's no other way to go. But I think it depends upon the prevailing practices within various disciplines about what might be the acceptable approach. Our perspective here is that good metadata in any standard is more practical and useful. Primacy. This came from the Canadian document for open data. It's particularly relevant to Government of Canada data, which is often foundational. It may not be a principle that is applicable to all data providing organizations. Timeliness. Now this gets to be maybe a bit more of a struggle to see the usefulness here. It may depend upon the use of the data. So the example I like to use here, if you're using tide level data for navigation in the St. Lawrence River, then you're looking for, to maintain the value of the data, you need to be looking at real-time delivery or near real-time delivery. But other users may only require monthly and yearly availability. So in this case, you may want to evaluate this particular principle in the context of what the data is going to be used for. Ease of physical and electronic access. Obviously, it should be available on the internet and easily available on the internet. A colleague of ours here at Dalhousie, Diego Ibarra, who is the developer of the Ocean Viewer at oceanviewer.org, suggests that 1 or 2 mouse clicks is all that should be necessary to get to the data. That might be a very steep requirement to meet, but it gives you an idea of you know, where in the internet world is considered easy. From standard formats, we are suggesting the highest score be reserved for internet services such as web mapping services and web feature services. These are OGC, or Open Geospatial Consortium standards, which we feel provides the best chance of interoperability. Non-discrimination. We know that in periods of declining resources within organizations, demonstrating relevance and usefulness is important. This often leads to organizations requiring identification of users or requesting information on how the data will be used. Clearly, somebody using the information for personal interest versus a coastal land manager using information for policy development are sort of two ends of a spectrum of what decision makers might consider useful, but this should not be mandatory. For the licensing thing, we've given the highest score for requiring only attribution along the lines of the Creative Commons licensing schemes. We'd be really interested in feedback from the partnership about whether Creative Commons licensing schemes is the appropriate place to be using in this context. The next couple of principles are particularly important for climate change adaptation information. This project was in part funded by Natural Resources Canada Climate Change Impacts and Adaptation Division. And it addresses 3 issues. One is the planning for the infrastructure that actually disseminates the data and information, that is the hardware and software, in terms of maintaining the reliability of the systems and changing technologies over time. The data management policies and plans is the second area. We are presently working with colleagues at Dalhousie to merge the use of the United Kingdom research data management plan templates with this tool. And finally, rigorous retention protocols. Looking at the cost benefit of keeping data. Clearly, not everything has to be online. Offline access may still be suitable for information that has low traffic. Usage costs, free is best. Supporting use. Again, from a climate change adaptation perspective, to discourage maladaptation, supporting the use of the data or information for coastal climate adaptation is important, so that the data and information is not being used in a way that actually works against the objectives of releasing it. In the American system, it only required contact for complaints. We thought that this was insufficient in terms of supporting use. Evaluation. Accessibility also relies on being able to use the data and information. If the data and information product is not easily used by a target user community, it is still not accessible. So regular evaluation of data and information products and the vehicles that provide data accessibility is a key principle, and certainly something that we heard in our conversations around climate change adaptation, in that for tools to be used by land use planners and coastal landowners and things like this, one had to be very clearly thinking in terms of the usefulness for those target communities. On the screen, you should see now three different examples of how we're working with our colleagues at Dalhousie on visualizing the scores. These were prepared by Robert Branson, who many of you may know. He was very active in the ocean in the data partnership for many years. He's now an emeritus scientist with the Ocean Tracking Network. It's a work in progress, but we see the visualization as a good way of monitoring progress and looking at it. So the three slides we've got here is, as we mentioned earlier, you could have more than one score from different perspectives. And so these are all Ocean Tracking Network, which you're going to hear more about from Lenore, who I understand is online, in the next webinar, looking at the different scores from three different respondents from the Ocean Tracking Network. And then accessibility scores by respondents and principals, so you can see that some of the boxes are wider than others where the different ladders were evaluated differently. And then finally, looking at the over-aggregated scores with showing the spread between score levels of the three respondents. So this is, like I said, a work in progress, a tool that we would integrate, visualization that we would integrate with the tool. The present status of the tool. There is a paper version that's available at the website, or the URL that's on this this page here. We are working on a Google form version. It still needs some work, and we'll be planning to tie this together with the visualization tools. We are entering into a pilot stage to test and revise the tool, and we're very interested in asking if there's anybody within that's on the webinar at this time that might be interested in trying the tool out and giving us some feedback. Although we are interested in receiving actual scores from organizations, in any kind of reporting we would do, we would not identify the organizations, at least in the pilot phase of things. So that's the end of the presentation. Just want to acknowledge that we received financial support from the Adaptation Platform Program of the Climate Change Impacts Adaptation Division of Natural Resources Canada. The tool development was done in collaboration with Dr. Bertram McDonald from the School of Information Management at Dalhousie University. And tool testing and Google Form and the visualizations that you saw are in collaboration with Robert Branton, who's an emeritus scientist with the Ocean Tracking Network. So with that, I would invite comments and questions, and I hope I didn't take too long, Tom.
Andy, thank you very much. You are right on time, and we really appreciate that. So at this point, what we'll do is we're going to take folks off mute, and we'll ask you if you do have a question to use a question or a comment, maybe use the chat function to let us know that you have one, and we'll call on people just so we don't have a lot of people talking over each other. And Andy, again, that the tool seems very useful and really applicable to the partnership, as you know, which is focused on promoting, data sharing and data interoperability. And I will, from the NERCUS perspective, I think it would be interesting for us to try to use the tool and see how we're doing with some of the principles, and I can talk to our data management folks at GMRI and see if there's some time that we could fit that in. So at this point,
appreciate that, Tom. We'll be very glad to have NERCUS's input and feedback on this.
Yeah, no, it seems like a really concrete example of how we can, internally we're always talking about how we can evaluate different aspects of what we're doing, and this seems like a very clear and straightforward process for evaluating that really important, primary aspect of what we do. So at this point, any questions or comments? I'm looking at the chat. I don't see anybody. And if you're having you don't see the chat or are unable to use it, please speak up, but I'll just wait a minute or two and see. Everyone should be off mute.
Hey Tom, this is Cassie from NERCUS. How about just seeing if there's anybody on the webinar who's interested in following up with Andy in trying this out, not just NERCUS. Is there anybody out there that's interested in that?
As usual, Cassie, you read my mind. So any other organizations online that might think they could test out their tool with their organization or one unit? Okay.
Hey, Tom?
Yes.
This is Fran Lightson at USGS. I'm thinking I want to take the recording of this presentation to our data management working group and see if they would be interested in trying it out. That's a little bit national instead of just this region. But I think that's a really good group of people who know about USGS-wide data availability.
That sounds great. Thank you, Fran. And we'll make sure to get the recording out to folks. And Andy, we can also send the information about this webinar and your request out to the partnership listserv, so it gets to a wider variety of organizations.
So Tom,
any other? Oh, go ahead.
I just realized that I misspoke when I said our contact information was going to be on the last slide. Just added it in here at the end. You can see my email and Alexi's email and connection to our website.
Great. Thanks for adding that in, Andy. So again, not seeing any questions or comments coming up in the chat. I'll say thank you again to Andy, and we will send out information where you can so you can access this webinar and share it. And again, I'll just remind folks we've got another webinar scheduled for October 23rd, and that's with Lenore from the Ocean Tracking Network, and we'll be sending out information about that. So thanks everybody for joining us. And
I have a question.
Go ahead.
This is Claude Tremblay from SLGO. First of all, congratulations for this tool. I think it's going to be a good tool for our members of SLGO, because we do not disseminate our own data, as you know. We have a lot of members who are data producers. They do disseminate data, but they are not all organized. And I think this tool is going to be useful for them to move a step forward in getting better about data management and dissemination. So congratulations for that. I was wondering if you have a deadline for us, if you want us to revise the tool and maybe pass it on to our members.
Well, not really. I guess sometime before Christmas would be good.
Before Christmas?
Yeah. We hope to present some of the feedback, not identifying organizations, of course, as we've promised, at the Coast GIS meeting in April. So it will be good to have some feedback from people that are using the tool by the 1st of January. Say.
Okay. Last question: how do we, if we want to have your newsletter, we go on COINAtlantic website, the newsletter you spoke earlier?
I'm sorry, Claude, I didn't quite catch your...
Earlier in the presentation, you said that you were sending newsletter every now and then, so I was wondering how we could be in your distribution list for the newsletter.
I'm surprised that you're not already.
I know.
I look at the screen. Send an email to aczisc@dal.ca.
Yeah.
That'll go to Alexi, and she will put you on the mail list.
All right, we'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully you can join us on October 23rd. All right.
Look forward to it, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you.